The waves rolled gently across Veridian Sound that Tuesday morning, an unusual calm stretching out across the horizon. Elias had taken his small fishing boat farther than usual, not in search of a better catch, but for something harder to find: solitude. Since retiring from the Navy and losing his wife Leona 2 years ago, his life had slipped into a quiet rhythm, a series of unspoken routines, wrapped in salt air and silence. As he reeled in his second empty line, something strange caught his eye. A shape, distant, gliding just beneath the surface. Too big for a seal, too smooth for a dolphin. Elias squinted into the sun, his heart beginning to thud a little faster as the figure moved directly toward his boat. At first he figured it was driftwood, or maybe a confused sea creature. But as the form came closer, golden, deliberate, his breath caught. A German shepherd. Her head bobbed just above the water, eyes wide with exhaustion. Salt water streamed from her snout. Her body was sluggish, but focused. She was swimming. Fighting. For her life. Elias froze. Every bit of training he'd ever had screamed at him. Start the engine. Get away. You don't let a wild animal swim up to your boat. But something in her eyes stopped him cold. It wasn't fear. And it wasn't aggression. It was something much closer to pleading. She kept paddling, legs slapping weakly at the water. It wasn't natural. It didn't make sense. And yet, she was swimming straight to him, like he was her last hope. Elias reached for the radio. Static. Useless. No signal, no cell service. Just him, his old 30-foot trawler, and a German shepherd, drowning right in front of him. When she reached the hull, no bark. No growl. Just one trembling paw placed gently against the side of the boat, her eyes locked onto his. She wasn't attacking. She was asking. Elias moved slowly, instincts kicking in, but even the Navy hadn't prepared him for this. Her claws scraped down the fiberglass as she tried to climb, her body shaking, muscles nearly giving out. She was running out of time. If he did nothing, she'd sink. And for reasons he couldn't explain that felt unbearable. With shaking hands he threw a rope ladder over the side. She looked at it, then at him, then tried again, this time with everything she had. The boat rocked hard. Elias gripped the railing, and his breath as the shepherd climbed, slipping once, but pushing through. Then she collapsed. Right there on the deck, panting, steaming, soaked. A smear of blood on her leg. Source unknown. Elias didn't move. Motionless. Frozen. Too stunned to act. Too afraid to even blink. He backed away slowly, grabbed a towel, a beat-up bowl, a bottle of water. Not out of fear, but out of respect. She didn't strike. Didn't growl. Just lay there, ribs heaving, eyes locked on his. And then, he thought of Leona. The stories she used to write. Fantastical tales of impossible creatures and unlikely friendships. She would have known what to do. She would have already given this shepherd a name. Elias knelt a few feet away and gently slid the bowl of water forward. She sniffed it, then drank desperately, spilling half of it across the deck. And even then, her eyes never left his. The sun rose higher. The sky warmed, but Elias felt a chill settle deep in his spine. This didn't make sense. But it was happening. It was real. Someone had left her out here. To drown. And now, she had chosen him. Elias crouched beside the German shepherd, careful to stay low and calm. Her chest rose and fell quickly, each breath shallow, wet-sounding, strained. Her leg, clearly wounded now, bore a raw, angry gash just above the elbow. He couldn't tell what had caused it. An animal? A boat propeller? Or something even worse. But one thing was clear, it wasn't natural. This had been done to her. Man-made. He opened the hatch under the bench and pulled out a small first aid kit, dust-covered, untouched for years. As he fumbled with the latch, she watched him, not fearful, not aggressive, just tired. Curious in the quietest way. When he moved closer with a strip of gauze, he let her sniff his hands first. She didn't pull back. When he pressed the cloth gently to the wound, she flinched, but didn't growl, didn't bite. She simply endured. Elias had seen that look before. On wounded soldiers. On grieving widows. On civilians in war zones. That haunted, hollow look of something, or someone, that had already survived more than they should have. He worked slowly, his hands trembling as he wrapped the wound. No protests. No sounds. Just her breath, and her trust. And that's when he realized he had a choice. He could try the radio assuming it worked. Call for help. Hand her over to animal control, the state, whoever. But that would mean confinement, sedation, maybe worse. People don't handle what they don't understand. He could wait. Just a little longer. Let her rest. See what happened next. He looked at her again. She didn't need a cage. She needed a chance. The radio crackled once, a tiny flicker of false hope. Then silence. Elias let out a sigh and sank into his deck chair, the weight of the moment settling in his chest. He glanced over. She had curled in on herself slightly, tail twitching now and then. So much strength, wrapped in such fragile vulnerability. You and me both, huh? Elias murmured softly. The first words he'd spoken to anyone in days. By late afternoon, the wind had begun to shift. The calm was breaking. Elias looked out over the water. He knew he had to move before the weather turned. The marina was too far. He adjusted the rudder and turned the boat inland toward an old Navy supply dock. Abandoned, hidden, quiet. As the boat shifted course, the shepherd stirred, but didn't resist. Her eyes tracked him, steady, understanding. As if she knew he wasn't leaving her, he was protecting her. He wondered what he'd say if someone found them. She was drowning. What was I supposed to do? Let her die? But no one would believe it. A German shepherd, alone in the middle of the ocean? Didn't matter. She was real. Her pain was real. And now, her life was tied to his. By the time Elias dropped anchor behind the rocky outcrop, the sun was already sinking low. The shepherd hadn't moved much, but her breathing had slowed, more stable now. He laid out an old tarp, another bowl of water, and the last of his baitfish, soft oily fillets she might recognize as food. Then he sat nearby, not from fear, but out of reverence. She hadn't chosen this life, but she had chosen him. And as night fell, and the stars began to appear one by one overhead, Elias sat beside the open hatch, watching her, listening to her breath. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. There was something ancient between them. Something sacred. He wasn't just saving a stray. He was standing in the space between cruelty and mercy, between abandonment and one last chance. Elias woke to the sound of steady rhythmic breathing, deep and close, just a few feet from where he dozed off on the deck. The morning air was crisp, and the sky above had taken on soft strokes of apricot and pearl. He turned his head slowly. The shepherd had moved during the night. Now she lay curled up near him, her body tucked close, her head gently resting against the edge of the bench where he'd sat for hours the day before. Not a threat, not a demand, something far quieter. Something closer to trust. He didn't move at first. He didn't want to break the moment. Her wounded leg looked better now, still raw, still healing, but no longer bleeding. She had eaten 2 of the fish he'd left beside her and finished off the second bowl of water. As Elias leaned in to check the bandages, her eyes opened. But there was no tension, no fear. Just calm awareness. He worked carefully, unwrapping the old gauze and replacing it with fresh strips, cleaned with what little saline he had left. She didn't flinch, not even when he pressed against the sore tissue. She simply watched, still and quiet. "You're not just surviving now," Elias whispered, barely audible. "You're fighting." And she was. Later that day, a soft buzzing sound broke the calm. A drone hovered above the boat, probably from a yacht or beach patrol nearby. Elias swore under his breath and quickly covered the shepherd with a tarp, praying the footage hadn't caught too much. A golden-furred German shepherd on a boat, this far out to sea, wasn't exactly easy to explain. "You can't hide a dog forever," he muttered half to himself. "Even out here." The idea of someone finding her, tranquilizing her, caging her, maybe worse, it stirred something in him. Something fierce. Protective. That night, under a sky so dark it felt endless, Elias made a call. Jordan Wexler. An old Navy contact who now ran security for a private wildlife refuge up the coast. A man who still owed him a favor. Elias didn't explain much, just enough. "I have an animal," he said quietly, "and no time to lose." There was a long pause. Then Jordan answered, "Bring her. I won't ask anything until you're here." Elias hung up with hands that trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of the decision. This was it. By morning he began preparing the boat. He rigged the stern with towels for shade and built a makeshift sling out of dock rope and netting, something to keep her steady during the trip. And when it was time, she surprised him. The shepherd climbed in on her own, slowly, shakily, but with intent. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was choosing to live. Elias started the engine. The old motor sputtered, coughed, then roared to life. They moved north. The coastline unfolded beside them, like a long-forgotten story slowly being remembered. As they traveled, Elias spoke to her. About Leona. About the silence that had taken over since she died. About mornings that felt like stone, and nights that never ended. The shepherd listened in her own way, ears twitching, eyes blinking slow. Every so often she lifted her head when he paused. It felt strange, and yet it felt right. Two survivors, drifting through a world that didn't quite know what to do with either of them. But halfway through the journey the weather turned. Wind screamed across the deck. Rain lashed the boat. Waves hit hard and fast. Elias tightened his grip on the wheel, trying to keep them steady as thunder rolled above. He checked on her constantly, afraid she'd panic or hurt herself in the chaos. But she stayed low, stayed still, focused. She trusted him. And that trust was the only anchor keeping them both steady. Just before sunset they reached the hidden dock, both of them soaked and exhausted. Wexler was already there, pacing beside a dark SUV. He froze as Elias pulled in, and completely stopped when the shepherd stepped off the boat beside him. She limped, but stood tall. "Jesus, Elias," Wexler whispered, stunned. Elias said nothing. He didn't need to. Together they led her up a narrow trail cut into the bluff, hidden, quiet, untouched. It opened into a vast sanctuary, trees swaying gently, cool freshwater streams running through the space, high walls masked by forest. A haven. At the gate, the shepherd paused beside Elias. She looked up at him, not just at him, into him. And for a moment, he saw something ancient in her eyes. Not gratitude. Recognition. Then she turned, took a few steps, and vanished into the trees. Free. Elias stood there, breath caught somewhere deep in his chest. It didn't feel like losing her. It felt like being released. Elias returned to the sanctuary the following Sunday. He came alone early in the morning, carrying a cooler full of fresh fish and a weathered old lawn chair strapped to his back. He set it up beneath a tall jacaranda tree, one that leaned into the breeze like it remembered the sea. She didn't come to him that day, but he knew she was watching. Golden eyes blinked at him from the shadows just beyond the trees, far enough to remain hidden, close enough to be felt. She remembered. They'd named her Freya, after the Norse goddess of war and beauty, a name full of contradictions. Strength and softness, survival and surrender. And over time, she grew into it. Her body healed quickly, but her spirit? That took longer. Still, week by week she grew stronger. She roamed the enclosure, explored the edges, climbed over fallen logs and sunbathed on high rocks. People came just to see her, the shepherd from the sea. A myth with breath and heartbeat. And Elias? He changed too. The man with salt-stiff sleeves and sun-worn hands wasn't just a widower anymore, or a quiet Navy vet no one really knew. Now they called him the shepherd's guardian. He didn't share the story often. But when he did, he told it differently than people expected. Not a tale of danger. Or even rescue. He told them about resilience. About what it means to be chosen by a creature with nothing left. And he always ended with the same line. She didn't swim just to survive. She swam to someone. People didn't always say much after that. But they understood. Quietly. Deeply. One fall evening, the sanctuary hosted a fundraiser. They asked Elias to speak. At first he almost said no. But then he looked at the photo on his mantle. Freya, drenched and broken, her paw pressed against the side of his old boat. And he said yes. That night, standing beneath low lights on a small outdoor stage, Elias told a garden full of strangers how a lost German shepherd saved a man who had nothing left to give. How she chose him, when he had stopped choosing himself. There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. After that night, donations to the refuge doubled. They built a new section, larger, wilder, open to the sky, and named it the Freya Enclosure. Below the sign, a bronze plaque read, "For all those who were never meant to be alone." Elias kept visiting every Sunday, always with his cooler of fish and that same folding chair. Sometimes Freya would watch from the trees. Other times she'd lay stretched in the sun, motionless. She never came close. But she was always near. And for Elias, that was enough. Then, one evening just as the sky turned violet with twilight, everything changed. She stepped out of the trees, slowly, calmly, and sat down beside him. No fence. No food. Just her and him. Their shoulders nearly touching. She let out a soft, rumbling sound. Not a growl. Not a warning. Something closer to a sigh. Elias didn't move. He simply looked at her and whispered, "I missed you too." And in that moment he understood something quiet. Something deep. He hadn't just saved a drowning dog. He had saved the part of himself that still believed in connection. An instinct. And hope. The sea had taken so much from him. But that day, it gave something back. Something wild. Something wounded. Something real. And for the rest of his life, Elias would remember that golden-eyed shepherd, not just as the one he rescued, but as the reason he started living again. If this story touched your heart, give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who still believes in second chances. Seriously, who would you have become in that moment? Drop a comment below and tell us, what would you have done if Freya swam to your boat? And hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more true stories filled with courage, compassion, and the powerful bond between humans and animals. You won't want to miss what's coming next.